Who would survive a zombie apocalypse?
Who would really want to survive a zombie apocalypse?
I'm a dad, baby.
Yes, we are dads. You are dads. This is Better Off Dad with Paul and Steve. Today it's about the zombie apocalypse. Not just any zombie apocalypse, but the zombie apocalypse. Who would survive? Who would want to survive? That's kind of beside the point. What we're really talking about here is a topic called accelerationism, which is sort of the equivalent of saying, well, if we're going to have a zombie apocalypse anyway, let's accelerate towards the zombie apocalypse and just have it happen. And on our recent theme, we're really talking about fascism and capitalism. And can we just accelerate capitalism and vote for the other side so that they can just get in power and collapse so that the other side can take over, so that our side, the good side, can take over? We're going to go through all the reasons that's a horrible idea. It's just as bad as having a zombie apocalypse, and what you can do to try to prevent the apocalypse from happening and to prepare just in case it actually does happen.
But before we do all that, don't forget to do all the YouTube things: like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you don't miss a single video.
If you're not driving, close your eyes for a second and imagine there's been a zombie apocalypse. I know, it could be mushroom zombies or virus zombies or voodoo zombie, whatever kind of zombie you want. There's been a zombie apocalypse, right? Imagine yourself after the zombie apocalypse, like 3/4 of the world's population is dead. You're whatever it is you imagine yourself to be or to be doing after that. Yeah, I know you've played games. I know you've watched shows and all that stuff. So I know you got a picture in your head of you after the zombie apocalypse. Okay, you got that? You got that vision? It's almost certainly incorrect. So if some of you imagined yourself dead or as a zombie or just most likely, buried under, in a mass grave somewhere, if you're lucky, or rotting in a field, you are correct.
All those options work fine for me.
If you imagined yourself anything other than that, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. Statistically speaking, you're not the guy running around with the Mad Max get up and the shooting zombies and starting over. And isn't this great? We don't have to worry about this horrible capitalist dystopia anymore. We could start fresh, and maybe with communism, maybe with anarchy, maybe with anarcho-capitalism. We could do a new system. I'm glad everybody died because now that ain't you. That is
close.
not you. You will be. It's this weird thing with zombie apocalypses that everybody assumes they're going to be one of the ones that live.
and if Night of the Living Dead taught us anything,
it ain't you.
It ain't gonna be you.
Our new theme song is now "It Ain't You, Babe" by Sonny and Cher.
It ain't you, babe.
Of course, what I'm talking about here is something that seems to be gaining a little bit of steam, and I want to do my part to squash it before it gets any sort of foothold on the left, and that's something called accelerationism. Now, accelerationism is this idea that it actually started out with this hyper-capitalist guy who believed so much in capitalism and technology and everything that he thought it should be accelerated at all costs, regardless of the human cost. China could almost be seen as a version of that, even though they've tried this experiment of hyper industrialization, hyper double down on technology. The human cost is worth it because we'll get to a point where it'll improve things so much that it'll reduce suffering overall. Yeah, there'll be some suffering in the short term, but overall. And the guy that found it, that came up with this idea of acceleration, he didn't even care about the suffering in the short term. He was like, that doesn't really matter. What really matters is the good that will come of this hyper technological, hyper capitalistic
The
thing.
means
If we,
justify the ends.
yeah, it means justify the ends, exactly, or ends justify the means.
Yeah, ends
It
justify
would
the
be
means.
funny
Right.
if the means justified the ends. The end is horrible, but we had a good time getting there.
All right, that's my new epitaph on my tombstone.
It didn't end up great, but it was sure fun getting there. So this guy's idea was capitalism improves everything, technology improves everything eventually. So why wait for eventually? Let's just hurry it up, get it going now.
Right.
Unfortunately, so this guy, I think he ended up dying face first in a gutter or something, I forget. But he did kind of go crazy. He and Aleister Crowley hung out. That
Well,
should
there's
give
your
you
answer right
some
there.
idea, some idea of what
Yeah.
happened to this guy. But I wish that his idea would die the the accelerated, painful death it deserves, because
Yeah.
now it's being picked up by people on the left who are saying we live in this capitalist dystopia. It's horrible. It's eventually going to collapse. So
Yeah.
what we need to do is double down to get it to collapse faster.
Yes.
Okay. So that's accelerationism.
Okay. Now, when you messaged me earlier about doing a show about it, I'm like, good, because then I'll know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm familiar. I've watched plenty of left TikTok, left talk to understand what you mean now. Okay.
Left talk. I
Left
like
talk.
that. It's like a left book.
Hashtag left talk.
Hashtag left talk. Okay. Well, if any student of history should should immediately pick up on the problem here, aside from the fact that people who advocate for this, who are on the left, it's one of two. I did a little bit of delving into this on one of my Facebook groups, and I found there are two types who advocate for this. One is somebody whose life is so shitty right now under capitalism that they're like, I don't see how I could be suffering anymore, right? So the quicker we get this shit over with, the better, right?
It's about 87% of the country.
Well,
know.
it's not, no,
know.
it's not 87% of the country. If there were 87% of the country, I'd be the first one to pick up a pitchfork and, run into the thing.
See, what I'm doing is I'm accelerating this thing. So.
Yeah, you're accelerating the conversation, aren't you? Yes. The problem is the amount of suffering that we would have to undergo if well, let me describe to you how the left has picked this up, and maybe you'll retract your statement. What they're saying, therefore, on the left is we should vote for people like Trump. We should vote in as many Republicans, as many wacky Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis type Republicans as we can, because these are the ones who are going to accelerate what we see happening under capitalism already.
All right. Now I'm totally on the same page. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So if you listen to last week's episode, if you watch last time's episode, you'll see what these guys are trying to do is fascism.
Yeah.
And under fascism, what they will do is they'll genocide people. So to be in favor of this type of accelerationism, that's the other thing you find out is it means something different to different people. So part of what we have to do is explain to people what is meant by accelerationism.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and this is why it's so attractive, is because most people think of it the way you were thinking of it, which is how Malcolm, like you might be thinking, well, Malcolm X said that we're supposed to hate white liberals. So, and I'm going to get to that. That is a term I've coined called anti-lesser of two evilsism. So accelerationism isn't speaking against the lesser of two evils, where people go, well, I have to vote for the Democrat because they're not Republican, but yeah, I don't like Biden either. And it's not accelerationism to say, no, you don't have to vote for Biden. You can vote for Bernie Sanders. You can vote for somebody who's further to the left of Biden, and you can work toward that, right? That's not accelerationism. Accelerationism is, no, you should vote for Trump or DeSantis because they're going to burn the shit house down, right? Because we know it won't work, right? We know fascism doesn't work, and then all the liberals are going to see that they should have been fighting against this as hard as we have been, and they're all going to jump on board, and it's going to be great. So 2 types of people advocate for this. One is your life is so shitty that genocide sounds good. You're like, I don't see what they could do to me that would be worse than this, right? The other type is somebody in a privileged position. You know, you're white, you're straight, you're you've got some means, some resources, you've got some community built already. And you're like, yeah, let's do this because you're not one of the ones that's going to be genocided.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You're like,
Yeah.
I'm poor though. I have a shitty apartment and I don't like my apartment. And maybe under a more fair system, I could have health care and maybe a better apartment. And then and you go, oh, so you're willing to have millions of people be, marched off and killed or erased so that you can have a better apartment and health care.
Yeah.
So there's the privileged point of view, and there's the things are so shitty it couldn't be any worse, right?
Well, the thing is one, obviously I was joking, sort of.
You don't have to defend yourself.
No, the two, the thing is, the same people that think this are probably the ones that like these zombie apocalypse scenarios, and don't realize that if they would just think about every zombie apocalypse scenario they've ever watched, the wrong people always end up in charge.
It's
always.
true. Well,
And it would just be frying pan meet fire.
in mushroom zombie world, it's the fascists that end up in charge, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's natural
Look at
for that to happen.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan from Walking Dead. Look how
Yeah.
long he was in charge of things, and what a horrible human being that character was.
Iron
The mayor
Sky.
before him.
Sarah Palin ends up in charge in Iron Sky. So there you go. Although that wasn't zombies.
Yeah, but it was still apocalyptic.
So a couple of examples where this has actually been tried in the past. About 3-4 years into World War One, communism was starting to, people were starting to look to Marxism, communism as a way to fix the world, right? Because clearly imperialism, monarchy, all that stuff is what led us into World War One, which was pretty much an Armageddon, right?
Yeah.
If you're from the point of view of the people involved, for sure, and even
Right.
people not involved, tens of millions of people, whatever. So Germany, in an attempt to, because they had 2 fronts going on, right? Nothing quiet on the Western Front, nothing quiet on the Eastern Front. But if you looked at their Eastern Front, it was the Russian Empire that they had to deal with, and the Russian Empire's allies on that side, And if they could get the Russian Empire to drop out, they could redirect all their forces to the Western Front, France, Great Britain.
Yeah.
Before the United States joins the war, because it started to seem like that was sort of going to happen. And they were like, once the United States joins,
I think you mean before the United States wins the war, as we were taught.
Before they came to rescue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. As a leftist, I wholeheartedly disagree, and I know you were joking there. So what did Germany do? Well, they had this guy, Lenin, who was living in the German Empire at the time. And they believed if they could get him to Russia, because Russia had already started to, there were some cracks in the seams over at Russia, because 4 years of war was wearing them down, and people, the whole Rasputin thing was going on, and people were not hip with the czar. The czar's dealing with a sick kid, and so they saw an opportunity. If they could get Lenin over there, they could accelerate the collapse of the Soviet Union, or not Soviet Union, of the Russian Empire. So they're using accelerationism to say it's gonna collapse eventually. We need it to collapse before the U.S. enters the war, so that we can move all of our resources from that side over to here. And so they snuck Lenin into the Russian Empire. We all know what happens next. Lenin is successful in forming the Bolsheviks, who end up winning the revolution, basically, and Tsar gets overthrown. The Soviet Union's formed. Russia, drops out of the war. Great, right?
Mm.
But it's like a biological weapon. Once you release it, it's released. Staying
Yes.
on the theme of zombie apocalypses,
Yeah.
right? You
Can't put the
don't
genie
get
back in the bottle.
the genie that is this biological. Think of it as my friend Dan Carlin calls it sort of a thought contagion, right? Once
Mhm.
you release that thought contagion, it spreads.
I
And
think we've seen plenty of evidence of thought contagion spreading in
it's
the
so
past
true.
couple of years.
So true. The infected, that is like a zombie apocalypse. So it didn't turn out well for Germany, having the Soviet Union over there. There were some struggles in Germany in which
Hmm.
communism looked like it was going to take hold.
Hmm.
Um, and it could have gone either way. I mean, there could have been a communist revolution in Germany in the interwar years. So World War I ends, Germany loses, and things are pretty chaotic in Germany. We all know their economy is horrible because they're having to pay all these reparations. Plus, they just spent all their money and most of their manpower on a war.
Mm.
And so then we see, we see a second version of accelerationism,
Uh-huh.
which is, doubling down on the fascism thing. So Hitler comes to power. Uh, the fascists end up winning. And by the way, we could have mentioned this in the fascist episode last time, but he won like 30% of the vote in the
Uh-huh.
in the last election that Germany had until 1946 or 45 or 46.
Yeah.
Hitler's party won like 30% of the vote.
I mean, he was kind of a popular fella
So
amongst the
yeah,
wrong people.
30%, right? So if your thought process is, well, but if we get a Hitler or we get a Trump or we get a DeSantis, it'll wake up the liberals, right? Well, I'm sorry, but even if you have 30-40% of the populace considers himself left or liberal,
Uh-huh.
even if it's 60%, even if it's 70%, they don't need but 30%
Mm-hmm.
to get
Mm-hmm.
themselves into office.
Yeah.
And once they're in office, they double down, right?
Yeah. And
So
yeah.
it took, so if you look at Nazi Germany as another example of accelerationism, you accelerate toward fascism because you think fascism's not going to work and that's going to cause the system to collapse. And that's when the left's going to swoop in and create this new utopia, right? In Germany, what ended up happening was it took most of the rest of the world to end fascism in Germany. It
Yes.
didn't end from within. Germany was ground to dust
Yeah.
before fascism ended in Germany. Who's going to come rescue the United States if we decide we need to get ourselves into fascism so it'll collapse? Who's going to cause it to collapse? Not the left. Most of them are going to be, killed in concentration camps or convert to
Yeah.
fascism
Yep.
because it's convenient and they can have a better life that way. So that's
Or
just
they'll just
two
wake up
examples.
or they might be lucky and wake up one day and go, "My God, what have I done?" You know,
Well,
they've already become fascists and they
and
don't
it's too
realize it.
and it's too late at that point.
Yep.
People ask like, how could this happen in Germany? Well, there's probably a combination of things, but one of them might have been, well, let's just accelerate this thing and get it to collapse. I couldn't
Well,
think of one example in history where accelerating a bad thing because you thought it would collapse if you could accelerate it
yeah.
ended up helping, right?
Well, one of the things that drives me crazy is this lie that okay, take Nazi Germany for instance. Oh, it was a different time. We didn't have the communication that we have today and all that BS. But if you just take a look around with all the communication we have right now and how small the world is because you can see everything all the time, all at once, that's not true.
Well, you have to remember the other side has the same technology you do.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like we have this communication now. Well, yeah, so do they, and they know how to use it.
Yeah.
I can't, again, I recommended it last week. I can't recommend it enough. The On Tyranny, because he
Yeah.
lays out
I gotta get
exactly
that.
how Russia used social media to almost win in Ukraine in 2014.
Mhm.
If it weren't for the courage in the of the of a if it weren't for the courage of the
The
fearless
fearless
crew,
crew.
Ukraine would have been lost. Um, but yeah, there's a lot that Ukraine did. Once now our eyes are kind of open to it, and it's harder to
Mhm.
do the propaganda now. But listen,
Mhm.
if you think helping the other side achieve their goals is going to help you achieve your goals, just no. So what do you do
It's
instead?
counterintuitive or counterproductive to it's not going to end well.
It's attractive because of the zombie movie logical fallacy.
Yes. When you consider the fact that uh, the reason why um, zombie apocalypse scenarios are so popular, I'm sure they're popular all over the world, but to Americans, the reason why zombie apocalypse scenarios are so popular is because of this like rugged individualism that we are taught that we are, and
Hmm.
we're really not, because the same people that will complain about one faction of the government, for instance, doesn't realize how much the rest of them rely on other factions of the government.
Yeah.
So but they're too blind to realize that because they've 100% swallowed the idea that I'll be the guy with the rifle. I'll be the guy leading the troops. No, that's
Well,
that's why we have all these people who are like the gun nuts that have everything stockpiled and ready to go for what? When the drone missile hits your house, you know?
so we'll talk about the gun nuts here in a second.
Okay,
Uh,
I get a little
that's all right.
I kind of blacked out for a minute there.
Because we're going to do the what to do, and
Okay,
stockpiling guns is one of the things that people sometimes suggest.
yeah.
And so the first thing, though, that I think instead of so I mentioned it's not anti lesser of two evils ism. It's so if you look at what Malcolm X did,
Hmm.
he has a few speeches where he talks about the white liberal being as bad for black folks as conservatives. I don't know if he says as bad or one of the things we have to fear is the white liberal because, and he gets into why that is. Like, and it's mostly because white liberals will say we need change, but they'll say, but not that fast, not
Yeah,
that. We don't do that. That'll make the other side mad, right? If
yeah,
you
yeah.
like armed black people in a courtroom, we can't have that, right? Riots, it's the same, like our modern version of that as people that'll go, yeah, it was bad what happened to George Floyd, but hey, we shouldn't have people burning down businesses and stuff, right?
Hmm.
As opposed to going, yeah, it'd be nice if these businesses weren't burned down, but we need cops to stop killing black people, you know?
Let's fall back and punt here.
Yeah. So, but see, that's a place of privilege because you could be like, you know, I hate seeing it on the news, but it's not happening to me. So I will work because I have compassion. I'll work to try to fix things, but not too fast because I might lose my comfortable lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So that's what Malcolm X was talking about. But Malcolm X wouldn't say go vote for George Wallace, right? He wouldn't say like this system's horrible, we're already suffering under it, we need to do something right now, we can't wait for it eventually to be fixed, we need to do something right now.
Right.
But that thing we need to do, he would never say, so go vote for George Wallace or Nixon or one of the other racist pricks. He wouldn't say that. He would
Mm.
say, hey, opposition party, either you pull your act together or we're going to form another party that's further to the left of you that
Hmm.
will actually make good on its promises, right?
Right.
So my point being, so it's not anti-left. So the lesser of two evils argument says, well, I'll vote for Biden over Trump because at least he's not Trump, right? um, And some people an accelerationist might say, well, Biden's just as bad as Trump. It doesn't matter which one you vote for. So what can you do? You can work to prevent the apocalypse, right? If we're
There's that.
So I would say instead of directing your energies towards how do we help the other side win so that things fail faster, instead of directing your energies there, direct it toward coalition building, maybe a way to put it, in my
Hmm.
opinion, we had to vote for Biden this last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Not because he was the lesser of two evils necessarily, but because he wasn't Trump. Trump winning a second term
Yeah.
would have been a huge step toward fascism,
Right.
which is something we don't want. So we got to try to prevent the apocalypse by building coalitions. Yes, even with liberals. And by the way, I think I've been pretty clear as a leftist. I can hang out with liberals. I like
Yeah.
liberals.
Yeah.
They
A
often make
lot
the
of
right
my
decision.
friends are small L.
I have a liberal friend.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I look at it as coalition building, So when I'm in my little leftist groups and they're
Mhm.
talking about, oh, we hate liberals too, I'm like, we don't hate liberals. They don't want to kill us.
Yeah.
You know, they may not be working as hard or as fast to prevent the others from killing us, but they're not actively looking for new and better ways to genocide people.
Yeah.
So what if that doesn't work and the worst does happen? Well, we need to be working on community building, which is something I've been thinking of a lot lately, because that's what almost every thinker on the left will tell you is the way out of this is mutual aid networks and real life networks of people.
Yeah.
That will help you in the short term, meaning before capitalism falls.
Hmm.
It'll help you find a better apartment or pay for your apartment or how do you get health care. Building because the government ain't going to help you. Like if
We learned that the hard way
yeah,
during the thick of COVID.
your landlord ain't going to help you.
Mm-mm.
You're that the only people who will help you are people in your same situation.
Yeah.
So if you look for those who are making a difference now, get plugged into those communities. I'm giving advice I haven't taken, by the way. I
Yeah.
fully
Well,
realize
I
that.
mean,
Look
Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers.
for the helpers, right?
And that also goes to what you and I have talked about a lot is think global, act local.
Yeah,
That's
right.
still
Yeah,
real.
yeah. Absolutely. So work on building those communities and none of this requires you to accelerate the collapse of capitalism because it's going to take some time to build these coalitions, to build these communities. And that's why I say keep voting for the lesser of two evils if you need to stave off, a DeSantis presidency or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's turn Indiana blue. What the hell? Because
Yeah.
then the Democrats have to listen, right? It's kind of like, okay, we put you in power, we can take you out.
Yeah.
um, and then finally, to hoard guns or not to hoard guns. I don't care if you don't like guns. I say don't hoard guns,
Hmm.
especially if you're like afraid of them. It's true that um, statistically, if you have a gun in the house, you are more likely to be murdered with that gun or to unalive yourself with that gun
Yes.
than somebody who
Yeah.
doesn't have a gun in their house. I
I
mean, that's
mean,
just common sense, right?
that's just math.
Yeah, that's just math. So the answer isn't just kind of hoard some guns so that you're ready if you're not a gun person. The best comment I saw was and somebody was like, yeah, but then that means it's all the right wing people that have all their hoarded guns and everything. Like if the worst happens, they're going to be the ones with the guns, and it's like that'll be a temporary condition because what will happen is we've been out here forming our communities, forming our coalitions, and so we're going to have a group that's going to go to the rich folks' house who's been hoarding their guns, who has no idea how to use them, hasn't
Yeah.
been forming a community. He's going to have 1,000 guns. We're going to take over. Maybe a couple of us will get killed when we're, raiding his house, but we're going to beat the shit out of him. He's going to die a lonely, rotten death, and we will thank him for providing us
Right.
this huge stash of weapons.
Think about it like during like say the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter protests and all that, where you had your your cordons of officers, law enforcement, and then you had the protesters. Okay, everything the law enforcement had, the protesters already had a plan against,
Hmm.
and then the law enforcement side had to then figure out, well, oh shit, we got to get rid of get the leaf blowers out of the true values because they're buying the leaf blowers, So
Yeah.
they had everything planned out well ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that everything that that came into opposition of them, they had a counter opposition to.
Right.
It's kind of like that. If you want to look at it as a recent example of how that works. That's why they were able to hold off as long as they were.
Look to the borders and look to the inevitable protests that are coming this summer, because it's where the police try to refine their tactics, and it's where the protesters try to refine their countermeasures to the police tactics. The reason I say the borders is nobody cares about immigrants, especially the brown ones.
Yeah.
So the police will, the police know they can get away with a lot. They use those tactics. They moved them to the indigenous lands where they were protesting the pipelines, and they refined them some more. You'll see it this summer because it's going to be pro LGBTQ protesting going on, and the police are going to figure, yeah, they're a small percentage of the population. People won't really care. Let's continue to try to refine our tactics. And then, of course, the leftist protesters will refine their countermeasures. So, but the whole point is you don't need to stash up a bunch of guns because plenty of guns will be available. There are 400 million guns in the United States.
Yeah.
And there'll be plenty available. So you don't need to stash up a whole bunch. That's my message there. And that is all I have to say about that. We're Better Off Dad with Paul and Steve, trying to do the right thing when things are hard, but it shouldn't be this hard.